My parents treated me like kitchen trash. One day before Thanksgiving, Mom announced my brother was bringing 34 guests to my house. Dad tossed me a grocery list and said, "Stop acting like family. Tomorrow you're staff." I smiled, packed my bag, and left for Vegas. When they walked into an empty dining room, Mom froze, then the doorbell rang. "My name is Nadia Voss. I am 32 years old. I am a corporate event planner, 7 years in, and I spend most of my working life organizing things that other people claim credit for. This is the story of a grocery list, a phone call I made at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday night, and a Thanksgiving that my family will not forget. Not because of anything I said to them, because of what they found when they walked through my front door. The list landed on my kitchen counter at 6:11 p.m. on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. My father, Roger, slid it across the granite the way you slide something to a colleague across a conference table. 2 fingers on the edge, a short push, eyes already back on his phone before it stopped moving. The notepad was from my junk drawer, the kind with the adhesive strip at the top. $4 at any drugstore. His handwriting, precise and vertical, the way engineers write. My mother, Vera, was standing in the kitchen doorway with her own phone out, reading something. When I didn't immediately react to the list, she looked up and delivered the briefing. Trace had confirmed 34 guests. Seating would need to be reconfigured. Dinner was expected at 2. I was at the kitchen sink. My hands were under cold water. I had been rinsing a coffee mug when they walked in, and I had not turned around when they started talking, and I was not turning around now. 34 guests. My house. A Thanksgiving I had not been invited to host. My brother Trace is 35 and lives in Denver and has the qualities specific to certain golden children of assuming that arrangements will materialize around him without requiring his participation in the arrangement. He had invited 34 people to Thanksgiving. He had told our parents. Our parents had told me. The sequence made perfect sense to all 3 of them and had simply not included a step where anyone asked whether that was all right with me. I turned off the water. I dried my hands on the dish towel by the sink. I picked up the list and read it. 31 items. My profession gave me an estimate before I reached the bottom. $1,840 in groceries, not counting wine. 14 hours of prep starting at 8 the next morning if dinner was to be on the table by 2. 6 hours of active service. 4 hours of cleanup minimum. I have invoiced corporate clients $6,200 for a scope of work smaller than what was on that list. I set it back down on the counter, face up. My father said, without looking up from his phone, "Stop acting like family. Tomorrow, you're staff." The room did not change. My mother did not correct him. She was already texting Trace, thumb moving, the matter settled from her end. I plan events for a living. Not small ones. Corporate galas, product launches, annual retreats where 300 people fly in from 4 time zones and everything has to run without a visible seam. I know what a 34-person Thanksgiving requires. I know it the way a surgeon knows what a procedure will take before the first incision. By training. By pattern recognition. By the specific weight of the ask landing against years of experience. 48 hours of prep window. $1,840 in groceries. A kitchen that needs to be staging ready by 7 in the morning. 14 hours of active labor. My father slid a handwritten list across my counter and called me staff. He forgot that staff gets paid. He also forgot that in the industry I have spent 7 years in, staff means someone there by agreement. Someone with a contract. Someone who has the option to decline the assignment. I know what it looks like when the person holding an event together decides not to hold it. I have been called in to manage that situation. I know the exact shape of that vacancy. The moment when the structure that was depending on one person becomes visible to everyone who is assuming it would simply continue. My father wrote item 7 on that list and called me staff. He had no idea that a staff member with options had just read the job description and decided not to take the shift. I have returned to that moment many times since then. And the thing I keep coming back to is not the word itself. It is the ease of it. He said it the way you say pass the salt. No cruelty in his voice. No awareness that it was the kind of sentence a person remembers for the rest of their life. He said it as a logistics statement, a role assignment, an organizational fact he had already settled in his own mind. And then he moved on to asking my mother whether Trace's girlfriend had any dietary restrictions. That ease. Not the sentence. The ease is what I keep returning to. Here is what you need to understand about my family and my house. I bought it when I was 28. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a covered patio in Phoenix, Arizona. I put down $60,000 that I had saved over 4 years, living in apartments where the air conditioning was unreliable, and I used a folding card table as a desk. The mortgage is in my name. The deed is in my name. I have put $32,000 of my own money into this house since I moved in. New kitchen, new flooring, a patio set I chose myself on a Tuesday afternoon when I had a free hour and wanted something that was only my decision. My family started using it for gatherings 8 months after I moved in. My mother told me it was the most practical space. She meant it as a compliment, I think, the same way she means it as a compliment when she calls me capable, the way my father means it as a compliment when he calls me responsible. What these words mean in my family's language, I came to understand gradually, is that I can be relied upon to absorb things. Capability is not praise in their vocabulary. It is a description of load-bearing capacity. Trace has hosted 0 family events in his adult life. He has a 2-bedroom apartment in Denver that he describes as not really a hosting space. His apartment is 900 square feet. My house is 2,100. This is the complete logic of the arrangement, stated plainly, and it has been the logic of the arrangement for 4 years without anyone examining it out loud. What that arrangement looked like in practice, my mother would confirm a date, usually by calling me and telling me the date rather than asking whether it worked, and I would say fine, and then the work would begin. I did the shopping and the prep and the cooking and the cleanup. My mother rearranged things on the counter while I was trying to use the counter. My father sat in the living room. Trace arrived with whatever he was bringing, usually wine that was better than anything I had bought, and was thanked for his contribution. At some point during cleanup, my mother would say, "I don't know what we'd do without you," which is not the same thing as thank you, and is especially not the same thing as let me help. I had told myself for 4 years that this was just how family gatherings worked. That somebody always ends up doing the most. That being capable means being the one who handles it. That my parents were of a generation that expressed gratitude through presence rather than labor. I had a long list of reasons why the arrangement was fine, and the list had gotten shorter each Thanksgiving. And now it had one item on it, which was that I had not yet found the moment to let it end. I also need to tell you about the group chat. I found out it existed by accident, in the same conversation where my mother announced the 34 guests. She mentioned a seating detail she said everyone had already agreed on, and I asked which thread she meant. And she paused for just long enough that I knew the answer before she said it. Trace had created a Thanksgiving planning group chat in October. He had added my parents and a collection of aunts and cousins and family friends, including, I would later find out from one of those cousins, Trace's girlfriend and 2 of his work colleagues who he apparently expected to bring. The chat had been active for 6 weeks. My house had been discussed and confirmed as the venue and praised specifically for its kitchen and the covered patio and the parking situation on my street. Someone had asked about the oven capacity. My mother had answered from memory. My name appeared in that chat 0 times. My house was mentioned 12. When I asked my mother about the chat, she said she had assumed I was busy and didn't want to bother me with the planning details. She said this the way you say something you have prepared in advance because you suspected you might need it. I did not point out that being included in the planning of an event at my own house would not have been a bother. I had stopped pointing things like that out a long time ago, because pointing them out had never produced any outcome except my mother looking briefly pained and then redirecting to a different topic. The pause and the pivot told me what I had been trying not to know for 3 years. My parents went to the living room after the kitchen conversation. I stayed at the counter for a while. I picked up the grocery list and read through it carefully. Past the turkey, past the sides, past the quantities I was mentally pricing at the fries 2 miles from my house. Item 7, disposable aprons. 4, he had planned for me to wear one. He had counted 4, which meant he had planned for helpers, which meant the event had a staffing model with a staffing budget that included his daughter, and he had written this down in his precise vertical handwriting and gone to sit in my living room without pausing on it. I almost picked up a pen. I want to be specific about this because I think the almost moments matter. The ones that tell you who you were and who you stopped being in a particular hour of your life. My first instinct was to add to the list, to organize the store layout mentally, to start building the morning timeline. That instinct was not something I was born with. It was installed in me over 32 years of being the one who handled things. And until that moment, I had treated it as a personality trait instead of what it was, which was a habit someone else had found useful. I set the pen down when I read item 7 for the 3rd time. My mother called from the living room asking whether I had enough baking sheets. I said I would check. I walked down the hallway to my bedroom and sat on the edge of my bed and looked at the wall for a few minutes. I was not crying and I was not calm either. I was in that specific state that comes just before a decision you have been approaching for a long time finally arrives, when the thing you have been building toward becomes the only obvious next step. I scrolled to a contact I had saved 2 years ago after a neighborhood association meeting. Camille Reed, Sagebrush Realty. She had handed me her card and said call when you're ready. I had almost called 3 times since then. The first time, Trace had made an unexpected visit, and things had felt almost normal, and I had told myself the situation was improving. The second time, I had come close enough to dial the first 3 digits and then set the phone down when I heard my mother in the kitchen starting on something that sounded like an apology and that turned out, on listening, to be a complaint about parking on my street. The 3rd time I almost called, I stopped myself because I thought, you don't burn everything down because you're tired. You find a way through. I thought about item 7, 4 aprons, counted in advance. I called Camille at 9:04 p.m. She picked up on the 2nd ring. It's Nadia Voss, I said. I think I'm ready. A pause, the kind that means she remembered. Then, I'll pull the comps tonight. Can we do a walkthrough tomorrow morning, early? What time can you be here? 7, she said. 7 works. I hung up and sat in the quiet of my bedroom. Down the hall, I could hear my father's voice, low, probably on a call with one of his brothers. My mother laughed at something. The sounds of people who had fully settled into someone else's house and found it comfortable. I did not sleep well, which was expected, and I did not expect to. I lay in my room and looked at the ceiling and ran through the math I already knew. $187,000 remaining on the mortgage. Comparable properties in my zip code were selling between $389,000 and $412,000. After agent fees and closing costs, I would walk away with somewhere close to $190,000. Enough to put a strong down payment on something smaller. Something without a guest bedroom. Something in a neighborhood where my family did not know the address. This is what I thought about instead of sleep, and I found it calming in the specific way that clarity is calming, even when clarity is expensive and arrives later than you needed it. I had been in this house for 4 years. I had chosen every piece of furniture in it. I had painted the living room twice, once in a color I thought I wanted, and once in the color I actually wanted. I had planted the rosemary bushes along the patio wall and learned, the hard way, that rosemary in Phoenix does not need as much water as you instinctively want to give it. I knew which floorboard by the guest bathroom door made a sound when you stepped on the right side of it, and I stepped on the left side when I was coming home late. I knew how long the oven took to come to temperature and which burner ran hotter than the dial suggested. My family had used my house as a gathering venue for 4 years. They did not know any of these things. At 6 in the morning, I got up and made coffee. My parents' door was still closed. The house was quiet in the way houses are quiet in the early morning before anything has started, and standing in my kitchen in the dark gray pre-dawn light, I had a moment of the specific kind of sadness that is not about what is happening, but about how long it took to see what was already there. I gave myself about 30 seconds of it. Then the coffee finished and I poured 2 cups. Camille arrived at 7:10. She had a tote bag over one shoulder and a tablet in her other hand, and the energy of someone who had pulled comps and studied the market the night before. Because that is who she is. We walked through the house in low voices. Kitchen, living room, dining room, patio. She moved with professional efficiency, making notes, measuring sight lines, checking the quality of the light. She told me comparable sales, 3 properties in my zip code, past 90 days, between $389 and $412,000. She said my kitchen updates and the patio work would put me at the higher end. She asked about my timeline. Today, I said. I want to list today. And I need a noon showing confirmed if you have someone. She looked at me the way people look when they are deciding whether you mean it. Whatever she saw resolved the question. She typed on her tablet. I have a couple, she said. Pre-approved. Looking for 3 months, serious buyers. They're coming from Scottsdale. They'd come at noon. Confirm it, I said. She confirmed it while I refilled both our coffees. Then she pulled up the listing paperwork on her tablet, and we went through it at my kitchen table. The grocery list still on the counter 6 feet away, face up, item 7 visible if you were looking. The listing agreement, the disclosure forms, the showing authorization, the commission structure. I signed where she indicated. My handwriting was steady. She remarked on it in a small way, not intrusively, just noting that most people's hands weren't that steady signing these particular papers. I told her I'd been working up to this for a while. She took photos of the main rooms, the kitchen, the patio, the exterior. She was done by 8:30. She attached the lockbox to the front door handle at 8:50 and told me the for sale sign would go in the yard before 11. Before she left, she stopped in the doorway and looked back at me. The owner doesn't need to be present for a showing as long as access is arranged. You're fully covered. I know, I said. She held my gaze for a second. Are you going to be all right? I told her I was going to be better than all right. She nodded once, like she believed that, and left. My parents' bedroom door was still closed. From behind it, I could hear the low sound of a phone alarm being silenced. I stood in my kitchen with my second cup of coffee and looked at the grocery list on the counter and thought about all the mornings I had stood in this kitchen making breakfast for people who were sleeping in my guest room without thinking about it. The number of Sunday mornings I had made 4 portions of eggs instead of 1. The number of times I had run the dishwasher twice because extra people meant extra dishes and I had not wanted anyone to see a full sink. I set down the cup. I had a flight to catch. If you have ever stood in your own kitchen understanding for the first time that the people sleeping down the hall do not experience this house as yours, stay with me. Because what I did next was not a reaction. It was the first thing I had done in this house in 4 years that belonged completely to me. I opened my laptop and booked a flight to Las Vegas. Departure, 7:40 a.m. My college friend Priscilla had been asking me to visit since June. I texted her at 10:22 p.m. coming tomorrow. Is the room free? She replied in 4 minutes with 3 exclamation points. I took that as a yes. I packed 1 bag, a canvas duffel from the top shelf of my closet, the one I take on work trips, toiletries, 3 changes of clothes, my laptop, my chargers. I moved through my bedroom quietly and efficiently, the way you move when you have packed enough times that the process doesn't require thought. Before I left the bedroom, I stopped at my desk and took a photograph of the grocery list on my phone. The original side, all 31 items, Roger's vertical handwriting. Item 7 clear in the middle of the page. Then I went back to the kitchen. I picked up the list, turned it over and wrote on the blank side, left the list for you. The house shows at noon. Agent has the key. I turned it back over, grocery side up, and left it where it had been. I walked out at 8:19 and locked the door behind me. The Uber to Phoenix Sky Harbor took 22 minutes. I sat in the back and watched the desert city go by, still early enough that the light was thin and the roads were quiet. Maya texted at 8:47. Maya Chen has been my best friend for 9 years and has watched my family operate for 6 of them. 3 years ago, she told me, "You're not their daughter, Nadia. You're their contingency plan." I told her she was being dramatic. I had never told her she was right. I texted her from the back seat, on my way to the airport. House is listed. Flight at 7:40. Noon showing confirmed. She replied in under 60 seconds, finally. The line at B terminal moved fast. I almost turned around at the security checkpoint. I want to name this because I think it matters. I was loading the duffel onto the belt and I had a specific, clear thought about my mother walking into the kitchen and finding no prep had started and calling my name into an empty house. The thought had weight to it, a familiar weight, the same weight that had kept me in my lane for 32 years. My hand went to the strap of the duffel. Then I thought about item 7. Disposable aprons. 4. I put the bag on the belt. Camille texted at 9:43. Sign is up. Lockbox confirmed. Scottsdale couple confirmed for noon. Have a safe trip. My gate was B14. I sat in the plastic chair by the window and watched planes move on the tarmac. At 9:58, my phone rang. My mother. I let it ring through to voicemail. The gate agent started the boarding announcement. I put the phone in airplane mode and boarded. I found out what happened at my house from several sources. From Maya, from Camille, and from 2 cousins who had been on Trace's guest list, and who texted me over the following days with different amounts of detail, and the same tone of someone who has witnessed something they aren't sure how to categorize. My parents woke up around 8:30. My mother went to the kitchen first. The prep she had organized in her mind, the kitchen already humming, surfaces cleared, Nadia in an apron running the timeline she had been assigned, had not happened. The kitchen was clean, undisturbed, exactly as I had left it. The grocery list was on the counter, face down. She looked around the kitchen and called my name. No answer. She went to my bedroom door. Knocked. Opened it. The bed was made with hospital corners, the way I make it before a work trip. The room was empty. She called my name into the empty room, which is the kind of thing people do when they already know the answer but aren't ready to know it. My father came out of the guest room. He assessed the situation methodically, checked the garage, empty, checked the driveway, empty, went to the kitchen counter. He picked up the grocery list, flipped it over, and read what I had written on the back. He set it face down and went to get his phone. My mother picked it up herself a few minutes later. She read my note standing at the kitchen counter, and then she stood there for a long time, which she later described to her sister as not knowing where to put herself, which her sister described to my cousin, which my cousin described to me over text in a message that took 3 attempts to finish. They called Trace. Trace called me. I was over Nevada in an airplane with the window shade up, watching the desert, phone in airplane mode. By 11, they understood the shape of the situation. The house was empty. A showing was scheduled for noon. 34 guests were texting Trace arrival times. The for sale sign had been in the front yard since before 10, which meant that the guests who arrived early, the ones who drove past the house before parking, had seen it. My cousin told me later that 3 different people texted Trace the same thing from the street before getting out of their cars. Is the house for sale? My father stood in my living room. My mother sat at my dining room table, in the head seat, the one she always chose when she was at my house. She had started setting the table. My cousin was specific about this detail when she described it to me. Not for 34 people. Not systematically. Just mechanically. 4 plates taken from the cabinet and placed at the nearest seats the way you do something with your hands when your mind is doing something else and you need to feel useful. She stopped at 4. My cousin thinks she stopped when she ran out of whatever was holding the action together. At 11:58 a.m., a white SUV pulled into my driveway. A couple in their late 30s and 2 kids who got out and looked at the yard the way children look at places they are deciding about. The father checked his phone. The mother pointed at the patio, where the rosemary bushes were visible along the back wall, and said something to the kids that my cousin could not hear from the street. Camille was there at noon exactly. She had the key from the lockbox and her clipboard and her professional warmth and no knowledge that anything about this situation was unusual. She had been told the owner would be away. She had a confirmed appointment. She opened the door. My mother was standing at the head of the dining room table, 4 plates in front of her, when she heard the front door open. She turned around. Camille stepped in with the family behind her and said, "Hi there. I'm Camille Reed from Sagebrush Realty, here for the noon showing. Are you the sellers?" My mother looked at the clipboard. She looked at Camille. She looked past Camille at the family of 4 now in her daughter's entryway. The kids looking up at the ceiling height, the father already pulling out his phone to photograph the kitchen. My cousin, who had been watching from the street, said the silence lasted about 5 seconds. She described it as the kind of silence that doesn't feel like a pause. It feels like a room changing temperature. Camille read it as uncertainty and said, gently, "The owner let us know she'd be away. You're welcome to stay while we do the walkthrough, or if you'd prefer to give us 40 minutes. My mother looked down at the plate in her hands. She set it on the table carefully with both hands, and she straightened it so the pattern faced the right way, which my cousin noticed and mentioned because it was such a specific and small thing to do in that moment. Then she walked out, past Camille, past the family, down my front porch steps and onto the path, where she stood facing the yard and the for sale sign and the street. My father came out 2 minutes later with both their overnight bags. He had found the grocery list on the counter, flipped over, my note on the back. He had read it. He had picked it up and brought it with him rather than leave it. My cousin's text to me the next day said he had the grocery list in his hand when he came out. He just stood there with it. Didn't say anything, just held it. Some of the 34 guests had begun arriving by then. They parked on my street and walked toward my house and encountered my parents on the porch in front of a for sale sign, while a real estate agent conducted a showing inside. My cousin said several of them stopped on the sidewalk and looked at each other. Nobody seemed to know the right thing to do. Trace called me 11 times between noon and 2 p.m. The family from Scottsdale toured my house for 47 minutes. They made an offer 4 days later. My phone came off airplane mode in the Las Vegas airport at 2:17 in the afternoon. I was at baggage claim watching the belt when the notifications arrived. 14 missed calls, 7 voicemails, 23 texts, numbers I recognized and numbers I did not, which meant Trace had distributed my contact information to people who needed a way to reach me. My Aunt Carol, 2 of Trace's friends, a family cousin who had been at the house that morning and apparently felt it was her place to weigh in. I did not listen to the voicemails at baggage claim. I picked up my duffel, found the rideshare lane, and got in a car. The driver had a podcast going at low volume, something conversational that I was not listening to. And I sat in the back and watched Las Vegas through the window. The city in the late afternoon has a particular quality. Still too bright to feel like evening, but the light going sideways. Long shadows on wide streets. Everything a little oversaturated. I watched it and felt something I had not felt in a long time, which was the specific lightness of not being responsible for anything that was currently happening. At the hotel, I went to the room, set the duffel down, took off my shoes, sat on the bed and looked at my phone for a moment before I did anything with it. I listened to my mother's third voicemail. Her voice was controlled in the way her voice gets when she is managing something that has not gone the way she organized it. Controlled and clipped and slightly faster than her normal pace. Nadia, I need you to explain what you did. We gave you everything. That house, that life. You had nothing before us. Call me back. I need you to call me back today. 41 seconds. I played it once and sat with it. She was not wrong that they had given me things. They had given me an education, a childhood, food, a bedroom, the reasonable infrastructure of a life that started before I was old enough to provide it for myself. I am not arguing that. What they had not given me, and what I had finally stopped waiting for, was the experience of being a person in their accounting rather than a category. The experience of being consulted, of having my name on the group chat, of someone picking up the grocery list, reading item 7, and thinking, hold on, let me think about this differently. Of one moment in 32 years where being capable was treated as something other than permission to demand more. I deleted the voicemail. I deleted the others without listening to them. Not out of anger or performance. It was an organizational decision. I had limited storage and limited energy, and neither of those things was going toward information I already knew. I texted Maya the photograph I had taken before I left, the original side of the grocery list. All 31 items. Roger's vertical handwriting. Item 7 in the middle of the page. I sent it with the caption, "Left it for them." She called me 30 seconds later instead of texting back, which is what she does when something requires her actual voice. I picked up and she said, "Tell me everything." And I did. I told her the whole thing from the counter to the airport. And she laughed at the right moments and went quiet at the right moments, and at the end, she said, "Nadia, I have been waiting 3 years to get this phone call." I told her I was sorry it took so long. She said, "You don't apologize for the time it took. You just got there." I was sitting on the hotel bed with my shoes off and the afternoon light coming through the curtains and a city I hadn't been to in 2 years outside the window, and I felt, for the first time in longer than I could account for, like something had stopped that had been running for a very long time. The offer came in on Sunday morning. Camille called me at Priscilla's kitchen table over coffee. The family from Scottsdale came in at $396,000. After fees, with $187,000 left on the mortgage, I would clear just under $190,000. Enough for a strong down payment on something smaller. Something just mine. No guest bedroom. An address my family did not have. I countered at $399,500. They accepted Monday at 2 in the afternoon. Camille sent the acceptance while I was sitting by Priscilla's pool with my feet in the water, and I read it and texted Camille back one word: perfect. She replied with a champagne emoji, which was the most expressive I had ever seen her be. I stayed in Vegas for 5 days. Priscilla cooked dinner twice. We walked the strip once at 11 at night when the temperature had finally dropped enough to be reasonable. We sat by her pool on Friday morning with bad coffee and no agenda. It was, without any exaggeration, the most relaxed I had been in 4 years. The specific quality of rest you get when you are not managing anything. My mother left 3 more voicemails during those 5 days. I did not listen past the first sentence of any of them. Trace texted on Thursday, "Nadia, what is happening? Call me." I read it and put the phone face down. My father sent one text message, the only direct communication I received from him in that entire period. It said, "We need to talk about the house." I did not reply. My Aunt Carol texted 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, after the dust had settled and the closing documents were in process. She said she hoped I was okay and that the family missed me, and that she didn't know the whole story, but she hoped we could all find our way back to each other. I read it on a Tuesday morning at my temporary sublet 2 miles from my old house, and I thought about what finding our way back would require, what it would ask of me, what it would ask of them, which was the harder question, because what it would ask of them was to be different people, and they were not different people. They were exactly who they had always been. My mother said you had nothing before us, and believed it. My father wrote item 7 and went to sleep. Trace invited 34 guests to a house he has never paid a bill in and told his parents before he told me. None of that was new. It had been true for years. The only thing that changed on that Wednesday evening was that I stopped accommodating it. I closed on the condo 6 months later. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a small east-facing balcony that gets the morning light. My name on the deed. My parking space. No guest bedroom. A building where the neighbors do not know my parents and the super does not have their number, and the address is not on any family group chat, because I am not on any family group chat. The condo is smaller than my house was. The kitchen is a good size, but the patio is just the balcony, narrow room for 2 chairs and a small table. I put a rosemary plant out there in a terracotta pot. It does not need much water. I know this because I learned it the hard way once already and decided to carry the knowledge with me. I do not host Thanksgiving. I go to Maya's now, where her mother cooks and her father manages the wine and nobody is assigned a role. The table is set for people who want to be there, which it turns out is a different experience than a table set for people who have been organized into attendance. The first year I went, I sat in Maya's dining room for close to an hour before I noticed that my shoulders had been somewhere near my ears for a very long time and had finally, in that room, stopped being. My mother's calls tapered off after the sale closed. I received one more voicemail in February, apologetic in register but not specific in content. The kind of message that acknowledges something went wrong without naming the thing. I listened to it once and deleted it. An apology that does not name the harm is not an apology. It is position management. I did not call back. Trace texted in February asking if I was coming to his birthday in Denver. I texted back that I didn't have his address. He did not send it. My father has not reached out since the single text about the house. That is the detail I return to most often, not with any particular weight, just as a piece of information worth sitting with. He said what he said. He wrote item 7 on the list. He picked it up off my counter before he left my house and walked out holding it. What he has done with it since is not something I have information about, and it stopped being something I needed information about around the same time I started sleeping through the night without running the family math in my head. My Aunt Carol's message about finding their way back to each other went unanswered. Not because I don't understand what she was asking for. I do. She was asking for the version of me that absorbs things without complaint to return and make the arrangement comfortable again. What she does not know, and what I don't have a way to explain to her without a longer conversation than I want to have, is that that version of me was never a version. It was a habit someone else had found useful, and I stopped running it. And I don't plan to start again. If you have ever been the capable one, the responsible one, the one whose house is the most practical space, you know what I am describing. The particular exhaustion that does not announce itself. That builds quietly, one family gathering at a time, one grocery list at a time, until the day you read an item and understand that the arrangement has a logic. And the logic has never included you as a person, only as a resource. Subscribe to Family's Secret Tales. There are more stories here, and they all begin in the same place, with someone deciding that a capable person is the same thing as an available one. The for sale sign went into my front yard at 10:43 on Thanksgiving morning. Camille texted me the photo. I was in my airplane seat, window side, desert below, phone in airplane mode. I didn't see it until I landed. When I did, I looked at it for a long time. My yard. My house. The sign with Camille's name and number and the Sagebrush Realty logo in the corner. The covered patio just visible past the edge of the sign. The patio set I had chosen by myself on a free Tuesday afternoon because I wanted something that was only my decision. I saved the photo. Then I forwarded it to Maya with no caption. She replied in 30 seconds. One word. Finally, I put the phone in my bag and walked out into the Las Vegas sun.